Okay, so this is my grandfather, Thomas Peters.
Hello.
He was in the Vietnam War, and I'm going to interview him. You ready?
I'm ready. Go ahead.
Okay. So, question 1. What branch of the military did you join?
I joined the United States Marine Corps. I was 18 years old when I joined.
Awesome. Okay, you said, okay, so my next question was when did you join the Marines, so when you were 18?
I joined them, it was in June of 1967 that I joined the Marine Corps, and I enlisted for 3 years.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow. And what was the reason that you joined, or were you drafted?
I joined. I was a volunteer. Most Marine Corps units are all voluntary. I joined the Marine Corps in particular because the Marine Corps is probably the best fighting force that the United States has. And I'm a loyal citizen of the United States, and I just wanted to do my best.
That's awesome. Where were you sent to after you joined the Marines?
Well, excuse me. After I enlisted, I was sent to boot camp in San Diego. Boot camp consisted of 8 weeks of intensive training. Following that was 4 weeks of advanced infantry training. At the end of that period, I'm probably jumping ahead, but at the end of that period, I was given a military, an MOS, which is a military occupational specialty job, because I had had 1 year of college prior to enlisting to the Marine Corps and was a proficient typer. I was assigned to S4 logistics, which is closely tied to supply. Logistics is responsible for making sure things are available and staged in an area where they can be delivered, whereas supply is actually delivering those items.
Okay, cool. So, what kind of things did you learn when you were at boot camp?
In boot camp, they teach you camaraderie, teamwork, esprit de corps, complete discipline. When you're given an order, you do the order unless it's illegal or unlawful, which none of them are. Marine Corps, in boot camp, they basically take a whole bunch of guys and they break them all down to their basic unit and build them all back up as a team. So you learn to trust the man next to you implicitly in any situation.
Okay, sweet. So where in Vietnam were you going to be sent to?
I was sent to Vietnam in January of 1968. And as I said earlier, my military occupational specialty was in S4 logistics, which is essentially an office work. When I arrived in Vietnam and was assigned to the 3rd Battalion, 26th Marine Regiment, part of the 3rd Marine Division, and they sent me to the far northwestern corner of South Vietnam, to a place called Khe Sanh, which was currently being besieged by about 30,000 North Vietnamese. Artillery and ground attacks and so forth on a daily basis. When I arrived there, the commanding officer didn't have any need for anybody to work in the specialty that I was, and so they assigned me to 81 millimeter mortars, which is part of infantry battalions. And I spent, out of the 13 months in Vietnam, I spent 11 of those months in the jungle and fighting, particularly with the 81 mortar.
Yeah?
Yes.
Is that like a big kind of...
An 81 mortar, technically speaking, is a smooth bore, single fire item. You drop a 13-pound high explosive round down this pipe, called a tube. It hits the bottom. It ignites some propellant and pushes it out. It can fire up to 3 miles away.
Oh God!
And it's a high angle trajectory round, which means you can shoot high over the top of areas where artillery can't reach and drop behind walls, for example, or behind steep gullies or into valleys where artillery would, because of the way they work, would fire way over the top. We can drop rounds in on top of the enemy at that point.
Okay. So, my 7th question was, how were you feeling when you were traveling on your way to Vietnam? Were you scared or?
I was nervous about it. There was a whole plane load of us. They were shipping a lot of people to Vietnam at the time. We left El Toro, California, made a quick stop in Honolulu, Hawaii to refuel, and then on to Kadena, Okinawa, where we spent 2 days there, and then after that we flew to Da Nang. I was nervous about it, didn't know what to expect, knew I was going into the fight of some nature or another. I just didn't realize I was going to get as deeply involved with it as I actually did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, how was camp life in Vietnam, or like, what do you want to describe that as?
Well, I hesitate to call it camp life. As I've mentioned to other people, the first 11 months I spent basically out in the jungle and so forth. When I was at Khe Sanh during the siege and up until Easter Sunday in 1968, we lived in underground bunkers. We made them ourselves. You just dig a monstrous hole in the ground and put steel matting over the top, and then about 6 feet thick of sandbags and boxes on top of it in hopes to stop a direct hit from a mortar. It never would have stopped the 152 millimeter or 120 millimeter rockets that they were firing at us from Laos and Korak. But anyway, after that, they put us on helicopters when we left there, and we went to Quang Tri. And from Quang Tri, we went out on operations for 4 months straight. We would come in out of the bush for a night or maybe 2, and then right back out again. But while we were out in the jungle, there was no place to sleep but on the ground. We would dig a flat area in the side of the hill and lay a piece of plastic on it and put a poncho over the top with some sticks, and that was it for the night. That's where we slept. That was camping.
Really?
Food-wise, I probably didn't have 10 hot meals between the end of January and November of that year. We basically lived on sea rations. That might tell you that I was really working in a forward operating unit. We were not in the rear area very much at all. We were essentially out engaging the enemy as often as we could find them.
Yeah. So what kind of stuff did you eat? What are sea rations?
What are sea rations?
Yeah.
Sea rations are meals packed in cans. They had B1, B2, and B3 units, and each one of them had different kinds of things. You'd get a case of sea rations, and inside the case were 12 different meals. And they were things like scrambled eggs and ham would be one, ham and lima beans was one, spaghetti and meat sauce, beef steaks, beef slices, pork slices. I can't remember the others, but there was, things like that.
Stuff that you could just get by on.
Yeah, you just open it up with a can opener, a little key kind of can opener that came in every box, and you'd heat it up. Typically what we do to heat it, we'd take a small piece of a plastic explosive called C4 and put it in the bottom of an empty can and light it with a match and put the other can with the food on top of it to make it hot.
Yeah.
In the absence of that, you ate it cold.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well. Okay, so you already said this, but your job as a Marine was to shoot mortars?
When I was overseas, I was primarily 81 millimeter mortars. When I came back to the United States in end of February in 1969, I was put back in S4 and was assigned to the 5th Force Service Regiment, 5th Marine Division at Camp Pendleton, California, where I stayed until I was released.
Okay.
A year and a half later.
You didn't go back?
Didn't go back to Vietnam, no.
Okay. So, what were your feelings going in towards when you were going to fight?
Nervous and scared, to
Yeah.
be honest with you. Yeah, the first time you get caught out in the open, which...
What was your reason for fighting in the Vietnam War?
I guess if my being there in some small way protected this country from communist influence, I think that was probably one of the biggest things on my mind.
Okay. So have you met anybody during your time in Vietnam that you still keep in touch with?
Is that recording?
Yeah.
While I was in Vietnam, I made friends with a fellow by the name of Daryl May. We all had nicknames. His nickname was Hayseed because he was from Indiana. Mine was Pete, obviously.
Okay. What does that mean?
Pete.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we don't keep in touch very much anymore, but he's the one that I think of most often when I think about the experiences we had together.
Yeah. Okay, so what was one of the most scary situations that you have been put in during the war?
Scariest situations. Well, I'll recount two. The first one was, as I mentioned earlier, when you get caught out in the open during an incoming. I was on a working party about 2 weeks after I was at Quezon, and I was out in the middle of nowhere, open area with no place to hide, and they started a very heavy barrage, and that was extremely scary. But I think the one that sticks out most in my mind was on one of the operations up in the mountains near the Laotian border. We had a CH-46 helicopter came down and crashed, and actually crashed directly over my gun pit. The front wheel assembly hit a log, rolled it over on top of me, and I was trapped under there for probably 15 seconds before I could pull myself out. In the meantime, white phosphorus and high explosive rounds started going off from the fire from the helicopter being crashed, and I was very lucky to get out of that one. That was very, very scary.
Yeah.
When that helicopter came down, we actually lost 4 guys from our platoon who were killed when that bird came down. So yeah, that was very scary.
I'm sorry. Okay, so what was the longest time you've ever been out in battle without like being able to come back to like a headquarters or like a camp at all?
Probably the longest time was when we were at Quezon during the siege. It was from the end of January until the middle of April. It was the better part of 3 months. There was constant, like I said, constant shooting at us and constant fire, and there was no place else to go. We were surrounded by 25,000 to 30,000 North Vietnamese, and it was a major battle during the Vietnam War in 1968.
Yeah. Okay, so was there anybody that you missed back at home when you were gone?
Anybody I missed back at home? Well, during that first year of college, I met a beautiful young lady with red hair and freckles who, after 46 years, is still my loving wife. And I missed her a lot, yes. And I missed my parents and my brothers and sisters and my home. But mostly, I missed the lady who became my wife.
Grandma.
Grandma.
How did you feel when you left Vietnam?
I remember that experience clearly. I got my orders to go back to the United States. I had a Jeep ride into Da Nang, which was about a 50-mile drive. I felt exposed during that because they had taken my rifle away from me, and I was there without a weapon. But so when I got to Da Nang, spent one night in Da Nang, and then they put us on an airplane back to Okinawa. And we called them a Freedom Bird. So I remember taking off and looking back and thinking, God, they're going to shoot rockets, they're going to hit this plane on the runway, I'm not going to get out of here. And it wasn't until we were probably at about 5,000 feet up, I looked back and saw the coastline of Vietnam fading away, and I felt completely liberated and free and exalted, and all the guys on the plane cheered that we were out, we made it.
That's awesome.
A lot of people didn't.
No. Okay, so how has your service affected you after the war?
I just have a lot of respect for anybody who served in the military, especially now these guys coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. That's tough business over there, just like it was anywhere during wartime. And I guess I just continue to love this country, and I know when the Iraq War broke out in the late 1980s, I told your grandmother, I said, if I could go, I'd go right back and do it again, just because I want to protect this country.
Okay, so are you comfortable about talking about this stuff to other people, or?
I am.
You are?
Yeah, I don't have any issue talking with people about the things that I did. I get melancholy about it, sometimes thinking about it. I will tell you, there's not a day in my life that goes by that I don't think about that place.
Mm-hmm.
It changed anybody who was there or in any place in war. It changes you forever. You just